Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you are tuning into today's episode of the Event Industry News podcast. I'm Adam Parry, editor at Event Industry News and your host today. Joining me on today's podcast is Chris Newlands. Now, Chris is the CEO and founder of a platform called Spelfie, which is a new and unique engagement and marketing platform for events and experiences. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam. Very, very kind of you to have me along today. I appreciate it.
No, we've been meaning to get you on for a long, long time. I know we've been engaging and discussing this topic that we're here today to chat about for quite a while. And I think it's something that the industry in a wide sense is looking at, especially around technology now. How can technology help our industry engage with our consumers, with our attendees, with our audience? But before we get onto that, could you tell us a little bit about how you ended up kind of coming into Spelfie and into the events industry? What's the background story?
It's a long story, actually, but I'll try and truncate it. I was approached a number of years ago about the ability to use space technology for a business concept, any business concept, and if you could find a use case for that, then there were grants and things available potentially at that time. Long story short, I was in the shower, quite literally in the shower, and I was thinking some great ideas about how I could use this space technology, I was thinking about some great ideas came up, and we'll go back to that at a later stage, I'm sure. But fundamentally, what I looked at is with any great idea, the problem is you have to market that idea to millions of people potentially at a cost, which would run into the millions or tens of millions potentially too. So the cost of marketing a great idea is prohibitive, to be honest. So I thought, well, how do I get the message out there to as many people as I can, and actually to young people too? Because fundamentally, you can tell by the face, I'm not particularly young necessarily, and I take photographs like that as opposed to taking selfies necessarily too. So long story short, I thought selfies. I thought youngsters, what do they do? They go to music festivals. They like experiences over products and brands to some degree. They take selfies, as I said, and as well. So I thought, so what could I do in terms of space? I thought, well, space, selfies, space selfies, space selfies. Is that a thing? Has it ever been done before? I literally got dried, went downstairs, searched for it. Nothing like it in the world.
Okay.
I went, whoa, that really is something special. So for me, it was about being able to relate to young people and not spend the money in marketing. And then we turned it from an idea, a novelty, into a business.
What was the process then like of turning that idea into a reality? I mean, for me to get hold of a satellite just seems like one of those, or to do something from space seems like a multi-billion pound project. I mean, we've seen it all now with SpaceX and NASA. We all know the stories. You know, these are really expensive things. So how are you managing to bring that on a really cost-effective basis to brands and organisers that kind of want to engage in this way?
Well, long story short, I went to meet with a couple of satellite organisations, one of them being Airbus, and they're a fantastic organisation. They're very innovative in their thinking. They do think outside the box, and they've got various divisions, and one of the divisions is Airbus Space and Defence. So I approached them, and before we could obviously share the concept with them, I asked them to sign an NDA for obvious reasons, which they were happy to do so. So they loved the concept of, because they're more B2B, they're more about mapping and defence and various other elements, obviously, as well. And this idea of being more B2C, it was an interesting concept for them too. And at that time, they were developing the A380 experience at that time as well, and that was coming to pass too, and the ability to see where A380s were flying, double-decker aircraft at the time as well. So we're thinking more B2C. So long story short, I developed the idea. It developed over time, and I thought, well, it's one thing to take a selfie, but it can't just be for your family barbecue. It needs to be something that's going to add value and add something experiential for the user. And actually, if big brands are going to pay for this, because there's an element of cost involved, what's the benefit in it for them? So we started to develop the concept, and to be honest, it was quite difficult because if something's not been done before, for? Where do you fit in the market? Yeah, and it's basically taken some time to develop this. And actually, although COVID has been devastating for the events industry, it does give you time, and has given us time to reflect back on our messaging and where we sit in the marketplace. And the ability to capture live events from space and all the attendees at those events with their permission, of course, and identify them using satellite imagery and give them something to share, has value in the sense that it's experiential for them, and also allows the brands to go directly to the consumer they're interested in.
Awesome. I mean, Airbus is a household name, isn't it? So
Yes.
it shows that you've got that really huge experience and technology and industry and engineering and everything behind your technology, essentially. So that sounds like an amazing partnership. I think most people, I mean, I personally would like have thought, I'll never get through the doors at Airbus. I'll they'll shut the door on me and go away. We're dealing with real stuff, kind of thing, not marketing and events. But testament to you for really reaching up to the top, because there are a couple of other companies up there with Airbus, but I would have never thought you'd got through the door, mate. So fair play to you to be able to bring that opportunity into, or down to, I should say, to brands, event organisers, people that create experiences, festival organisers. Because without you in the middle, probably never happen, really.
I think it probably would eventually have happened, Adam, but I think, like everything else, everything seems obvious when you've thought about it, if that makes sense. And when you're presented with a concept, you think, well, that it's so obvious in some ways, the ability to actually, and we were called recently Google Earth Live, so in inverted commas, which I think is a great way of explaining this, because actually Google Earth captures images, and they're a mashup of space images, aircraft images, and obviously street view, if you like, as well. But because of the complicated machinations of pulling all that together, they're very often like 3, 5, 7 years out of date, whereas we're going to take a picture on the same day, capture the magical elements of the actual event itself, make it really experiential. I mean, branded brands can be seen from space if they're the right size and scale and shape, and messaging can be captured from space as well. And I think that's what caught the imagination of the BBC, to be honest.
I totally agree with that. I know you can remember the stories, can't you, of people trying to position themselves as the kind of the Google cars and cameras went around so they could get that little piece of history of like, I'm on this street or this landmark or something like that, and they still exist. And I think there's even like a website that you can go to where people are captured in really funny situations or funny things, and you can kind of check that out. So yeah, I can totally see why people would want to be captured in that way. I mean, being compared to Google, that's a really good start, mate. That's a really good thing.
Well, it's the same technology, because I mean, Google will rely on. There's another company called Maxar, which we're talking to as well just now. So Maxar and Airbus are they supply defense quality satellite imagery, which is what Google uses. Yeah, so there is a relationship there in the sense that obviously they're using the same technology, just that we're using it the same day, right? As opposed to something that's obviously historic or archived as such. So it just brings it alive. And I think there's a glamour about space that you very often see people with almost as the virtual helmet comes down just as you speak to them, because they can imagine the ability of actually capturing that experience from space.
Well, let's be honest about it. We've, as a whole civilization, we have been looking to the stars since the dawn of man. Yep. And I even say to my wife sometimes, I feel like I was born a little too early. I'm one of those, a geek. I watch Star Trek and Stargate and all of these other things because the exploration, exactly, mate. Yeah, live long and prosper. There's a whole world out there, but for many people, they don't get that opportunity to interact with that environment, do they? So having their photograph taken from space, that's like the whole, like, I've bought a little bit of land in Scotland and now I can be called a lord kind of isn't it? It's like as a Scotsman yourself, you'll know how that story goes. But I guess what I'd really like to explore then is talk to me about the experience from an attendee perspective. Like, what's the process of, I'm going to a festival or I'm going to a product launch with one of my brands, let's say it's Ford or the BBC you mentioned earlier, they're doing this activation. How do I get involved in that as an attendee then?
Activation is key because I mean, Spelfie is an app, and it's event agnostic, which is a benefit in the sense that obviously you can take it from event to event type. So fundamentally, you might have one sponsor that actually has several types of different events, which actually there will be some element of continuity. I think also from the attendees' perspective, it's almost like capturing a library of selfies or spelfies, if you like, in one place. So different experiences potentially too. And the reason why there's an element we can be linked to existing apps, for example, within events, but they can't have control because there's an element of control within our app. Our app is actually, it is proprietary, and that's why we have the patent that's pending across the globe just now, which should be granted within the next 5 months. So fundamentally, it's got something different attached to it. So the user would just get a QR code on their ticket. There'll be messaging on screens. There'll be the social engagement, and it can happen weeks, months, and even years in advance, because we can tell you exactly when a satellite will be overhead at a given time, years in advance, almost like a super bus timetable, if you like. Yeah.
Wow.
So that means you can be very accurate, and you can work out angles, and you can work out a number of other aspects as well. So from the user's perspective, it's really simple. They download the app, they get push notified before the event. There's a countdown to when the actual event's going to happen. There's an element of communication that the brand or the event can actually communicate through push notifications to the actual attendee before they get there, when they're there, and possibly even after it too. And that allows for engagement. So buy one beer, get one free. And also there's an element of data capture there, retargeting. You can obviously engage with the users thereafter too. So from the user's perspective, dead simple. Take a selfie using the app. We identify where you are using geolocation, using our app and the satellite picture. So those two work together, so we can put a pin above your head. Now, critically, there's no such thing as space to face. It doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's in a 007 movie somewhere, and there's an enhance button in your keyboard. But there's privacy reasons why that isn't the case, because people would abuse it. Let's be utterly clear if that's the case. So there's an international moratorium that suggests that there's a maximum granularity that you can take from space, and bearing in mind the satellites are 600 kilometers away. So the value of having a satellite image on the left hand side, and on the right hand side your selfie which you've taken, which identifies you in the picture, having a pin above your head. So if you're at the front of the main stage, or if you're in the north stand, you'll have a pin directly above your head. With the brand saying powered by the brand associated with the actual imagery as well. They then share that on social platforms because it's already aligned for social sharing. So all they do is take the picture, get the picture, share it, job done.
Let me ask you a question then, because it sounds like you're well connected, Chris, and you know a lot about this. Do you think there is such a thing as space to face? Because it would suggest to me that there maybe are some, I don't know, large northern companies that may have access to that kind of technology to be able to help their special forces and things like that. Do you think that exists? Do you think we'll ever see? Let me ask you this: do you think we'll ever see that in our lifetime of us being able to access that level of granularity around space photography?
So the answer to the question, I think, is probably yes, because technology will take over, obviously, and become, you know yourself, there's the various theories about technology doubling in its capacity every 2 years, effectively.
Yeah.
So what we have today will be very different in 10 years' time. And there's talk, I think, of Google and Amazon actually looking at smaller or constellations of satellites that can bring Wi-Fi, but also offer my understanding is, the ability to actually almost offer Google Earth Live, if you like. So it's a bit Big Brotherish. I'm not entirely comfortable with it necessarily, and I don't think many people are. So I foresee a maybe lower resolution, because to give you an idea, some of the satellites that are up there, the defense quality ones, the gyros in these satellites are the same size as the microcube satellites they're sending up. So they're much greater in terms of stability, the quality of the imagery. So I think if we're going to have constellations of satellites, they'll have to be a bit closer to Earth, and the granularity won't be quite as good, but it could offer real-time, I'll use the word tracking potentially, which is a bit Big Brotherish, as I say. But I foresee there'll be an ability for that to become more and more clearer as time progresses.
Well, the thing I've learned about, and not to go off topic too much, but the thing I've learned about privacy and security is it means different things to different people.
Yeah.
Like if we were to throw the technology that we have now and the tracking abilities that we have in things like cars and phones and stuff, if we were to throw that at somebody 50 years ago, they would freak out, wouldn't they? Because it's not normal. And the thing about privacy and privacy is people are willing to give it away if there is a benefit to them.
Yes.
So it could be something as simple as maybe on my plot of land, I've given access to that extra enhanced visibility because I get added security features from Google or something like that on my property. So we'll see. So would it be right in saying then, Chris, that essentially what you are is an influencer platform?
Yeah, an influencer platform is the best way to describe it, I would suggest, in the sense that from a brand perspective, we capture thousands, tens of thousands, and potentially even millions, and I'll come back to that later, of people, their experiences or their ability to, inverted commas, participate in an event, and by doing so, what they then become is, because they're like Adam and the other like Chris, we've got loads of friends on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even LinkedIn potentially too, and if I share something, because they're my friends and we engage on a regular basis, I'm trusted, to be honest, and I think the value in this is there's a great authentic alignment between the brand and the attendees. If you think about attendee sponsorship for brands, they've already made the decision they're going to sponsor an event. Why? Because it ticks their demographic buttons, the content or the relevancy to their brand has been associated. So if they can actually capture thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions, as I've said, of people at that particular event, send them all a souvenir of that, which is free of charge in any event, optimize for social sharing. They then share it because it's a casual share onto their various platforms, their favorite platforms. Then you have this engagement piece. So we're nano influencers, but thousands of them. And if you combine that together, and it actually creates a real constellation or an army of many influencers on that, nano influencers. And I think with 25,000 social posts a second, any brand, irrespective of their budget, are struggling to rise above the noise. But if you can turn 25,000 people and 1,000 followers in each of the various platforms into an army of engagement, if you like, or an opportunity to engage with that content, then they'll rise above the noise.
Yeah, I love that bit, because I was reading an article this morning before we jumped on this podcast, and it was actually one that was sent to me to publish on Event Industry News. The headline was the online influencer is dead. Now, when I looked into that a little bit more, a little bit deeper, what they were suggesting is that over the past sort of 5 or 6 years, the rise of influencer marketing, brands positioning products or paying certain influencers, those with a social following, sometimes small, sometimes enormous. You know, we've all heard the Kim Kardashian kind of fees for a single post and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, that has worked, but people are getting wise to that. People understand that these celebrities or influencers are ultimately being paid for product placement. So there becomes a disconnect in, like, well, does this person actually genuinely have a brand association, as in, like, I believe in Ford, or I believe in Apple, or I believe in, I don't know, the latest hand cream or something, or am I just being paid to push it, and I'd hope that you buy some and I get paid a nice big fat check? So I think, and that's certainly the way that I feel. I'm always extremely cautious. However, when my friend tells me about something, or I see something on my friend's profile, or they've shared something, the trust in that is much, much higher for me personally, because I know that they've probably invested their own money and they're giving a good review. So I guess that's where you're cutting into the difference, aren't you? You're allowing brands to have that genuine referral and connection, both to that audience that's engaging there, but also their sphere of influence as well, the people that are connected with them, their family, their friends, and probably in most cases very like-minded people, or very the same kind of people that like the same kind of stuff, because that's how social networks work, right? So would you agree with that? Is that where your value is that it's more genuine than brands obviously got to invest in Spelfie to make that happen, but ultimately any share is a genuine share based on that person wanting to be a part of that experience for that brand?
and they're not paid, which is really important. So
Yeah.
I think one of the key things with, and rightly so, I hasten to add, I actually do agree with Sprout to some degree in terms of mega influencers, because I do think there is a disconnect between the authentic aspect and the brand and the consumer. And there's an element of they would say that, wouldn't they, because they're getting paid to some degree too. But if you're genuinely enhancing the experience for the attendees, then they will value that, because you're adding an angle. It's almost like having a 600-kilometer long selfie stick and be able to take that picture and actually capture that event. And because I'm not getting paid for it, I don't have to splash everywhere. This is an advertisement, and I think that's done a really good job of making it honest, if you like, as well. And I think the value play for me is that we genuinely enhance in tandem with the brand and the event and the sponsor the experience thereafter, and it adds significant value. Now, to put some numbers around that, because I think it's important to do so. If you talk about an influencer with, say, 5 million followers, okay, they'll charge somewhere between $100,000 and $250,000 minimum for a single post, yeah, and that would equate to roughly 83,000 likes or comments. That is roughly typical according to various sources that we have. So that you're looking at somewhere between £1.20 and £3 per or $3, sorry, per engagement, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
If you did the same with 5,000 people at an event, and they're nano influencers. Now, the first thing to mention, and they've all got 1,000 followers, that's the same 5 million audience that's seeing this. They got over 400,000 likes and 11 times more comments.
Wow.
Okay. For roughly 12 pence. And so between 10 and 25 times cheaper than a mega influencer. So you start to understand there's actually, I think people are just, they want value, they want a decent ROI, brands that is, they want to engage with the audience that obviously are relevant to themselves, and simultaneously they want to be seen as somehow enhancing the experience for the attendees, and that value play, I think, works better between the brand and the consumer.
I mean, we talk about ROI a lot. We talk about facts and we talk about numbers generally. We talk about impressions and likes and those kind of metrics and circle of influence, which is obviously the number of followers. But we never talk about generally, or and I have never hear many people talk about the quality of that metric, right? We always tend to focus on figures, but what is the quality of the engagement? And it just strikes me so much that the quality of the engagements that you're providing a brand far outweigh that of a Kim Kardashian post. And let's be honest about it, the types of influencer that maybe Kim Kardashian or even smaller influencers are, they're only accessible really to the bigger brands or the brands that have got the big budgets. You know, to invest 100,000 or $500,000 in a single post is no, you know, small decision, is it?
No.
What you're bringing to me is influencer marketing with a much more accessible budget for smaller, maybe even organisers such as me with a few thousand people at my event or something like that.
Yeah,
that is much more manageable to work on a 12-15p ratio than the £2-3 ratio or more based on my audience. I really like it, mate. Just one thing. Will we ever see a 600-kilometer Spelfie stick then? Is that an April Fool's going to be? Like, I can just see that, like, Spelfie, the 600-kilometer selfie stick.
I need to eat a wee bit more porridge, to be fair, but after that, I'm sure I could manage if it was aluminium, but no, it's, do you know, sometimes you try and paint pictures, don't you? And it's visualizing things, isn't it? And
it's a great one, mate. It's great. I could, maybe there's a world record there for you, something like that. Maybe not 600 kilometers, but maybe Spelfie could go for the world record of making the longest selfie stick, and that could go along with part of your marketing. But I do like it. I could just see that email landing in my inbox now saying Spelfie, the 600, and you'd be like, what? Let's have a look at this, and you can, and then you get the pitch. Just to continue talking about ROI though a little bit more. What kind of information and statistics and insight is available then to your customers in terms of their activations and what that means bottom line for their brand?
It's very extensive, actually. I mean, fundamentally, 18 months ago, there was no information out there on nano influencers or micro influencers. It was all about megas, if you like. So the statistics are becoming more and more refined, and they're being corroborated amongst various digital platforms as well. Yeah. So we're looking at 8.3% of the audience that are actually engaging with nano influencer type campaigns and influence and mega ones as well. But it's all to do with the statistics themselves. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Let's be utterly clear, okay? And I think every brand's subject to its campaigns, subject to the relatability of that brand to that particular audience. Will have different metrics, to be fair. The age groups as well. If it's golf, for example, it might be slightly different if it's compared to the demographic of a music festival, for example. So they do vary, but we do have extensive statistics there that do lend themselves to adding value, significant value. We're not suggesting that we are replacing Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google, but we are offering something a wee bit different from your typical digital event activation scenario. In that, what we do is we go straight to the consumer who are at the event. And if you think about any of the digital marketing tools, they're algorithm based, or they've got some kind of intelligence, and what you're looking for is 18 to 35, likes music festivals, lives in a particular area, but the fishing shoal is about 10 million. And how do you get that down to 50,000 people? And there's the biggest stadium in the world only holds 114,000 people. So that there's a huge amount of accuracy because we go straight to that point too. So I think there's the improved ROI is a number of things. It's about the ability to go straight to the audience. It's the ability for them when they share it to get 5 to 11 times better returns than you would get from a mega influencer. And because it's shared on social platforms, it's then organic and it can't then be suppressed by algorithms at that point as well. So there's a value play. I think it's almost like an onion. There's several layers of this that I think brands will find very, very interesting.
There's two things there that I think to me are really, really interesting, and to expand on them. You mentioned earlier that an audience member or a participant would share it to their favorite network. Now we all know that brands invest heavily on scale over the course of a year in Facebook, in Twitter, in LinkedIn, and all of these platforms in order to push their brand, their message, their marketing. And then Facebook specifically well known for having kind of like, you have Chris, so let's look for an audience like Chris. But that data that you've got at that moment in time has to be super accurate. Otherwise, that lookalike audience for Chris is not going to be that accurate, and you're going to be wasting your marketing budget. So for me, what you're also providing, or it's very apparent to me, is you're providing a way for a brand to create super niche audiences that they can then use their budget on Facebook to kind of expand on that and push their message further. But also they know where to target you. Because if you've posted for Facebook, that's clearly your preferred social platform. If you post to Twitter, that's your preferred social platform.
Makes sense,
So therefore, I don't have to spend money in 3 places to focus on Chris. I know that it's probably going to be Facebook where he's going to be seen most of the time. So I'm gonna take the other 2 out. I'm going to take the other 2 marketing dollars out and put that somewhere else, or put it into Facebook to target Chris better. So on a project management or targeting basis, you're providing a funnel which enables the marketer to be extremely targeted with the rest of their marketing for their audiences around that platform.
100%. And these are fantastic platforms. I mean, they really are. I mean, we all use them. I think what we bring to the party, though, is the ability to capture audiences and the data and own the data. And I think there's still a wee bit of frustration about the fact you build up an audience on social platforms and it costs you money to do so. Then you have to pay them again to speak to your audience, which is just mental in some ways, you could argue. So we've all fallen into this wonderful honey trap of spend money on this. And so they use the classic MBA, build a marketplace and then sell to that marketplace. It is classic. It really is. And there's nobody can think of anywhere else other than Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google to spend their money, which is actually mental in some ways. So I think what we bring to the party is we're not an alternative. We're there to augment the experience 100%. But we do offer something that I think is to be unique.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think it's very interesting you say that, because I recently got an invitation via Facebook to join part of their events program. Obviously, being in the events industry, to promote my events and sell tickets on their platform. So all of a sudden, Facebook's becoming a ticketing platform, which is a really interesting move. But really, I shared this with my network of event organisers and peers that I'm connected with. And one other organizer really cleverly pointed out, it was like, yeah, you can own your audience for a little bit longer, and then they're gonna take it off. Yeah.
It's true.
So that control over that data, or having, making sure that you are utilizing these platforms as a way to amplify rather than control your audience, I think it's a really interesting point.
100%. Well
What
said.
also what also strikes me at the moment, mate, is that there are lots of these virtual events going off, and in the future, it's very much talked about a hybrid world. So we're talking about events like Event Tech Live that take place in London each year, but with an audience from, let's say, 90 plus countries. We're talking everywhere from maybe the British Virgin Islands all the way over to Australia, all the way to America. Now, for my audience, there's no real way for them to share their involvement, especially right now, even based in the UK. Like, if physical events can't happen, so those selfies that happen every year that I share on social media at my event, they're not happening because that physical event doesn't happen. So I would imagine you're a very good way of kind of helping an organizer create a collective engagement with their audience, no matter where they are in the world, through your technology. Do you see a future in hybrid events for Spelfie?
100%. There's almost a unintended benefit of COVID, which I hate to say because it's disastrous and it's affected so many people. It's a pandemic. It's quite literally terrifying at times because you can't see this thing. Yeah. But fundamentally, what's come of this is digital engagement, if you like, has come on, they reckon 10 years is the number I've heard. Yeah. But for me, imagine a scenario. Let's talk about the Super Bowl as an example. Yeah. So Super Bowl, 102 million people tuned in this year to watch the Super Bowl. Okay. But as I said before, there's only two stadiums that have got in excess of 100,000 people capacity. So there's another 101,900,000 people out there that are watching these events remotely and will never ever squeeze into a stadium. Yeah. So it's made us think differently as well. So the ability to actually capture the actual event from space as the satellite passes over with some visible from space branding, which I can obviously share with the prospective opportunities and events going forward. But what that means is that you can capture, let's imagine all the players in the center circle and the satellite passes over, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning in Sydney or whatever the case may be, you have the ability to put on your 49ers top and take a selfie and participate and show that you're supporting your team from any point in the world. The value of that to the consumer is enormous because they're getting something, a souvenir of their participation. But from the brand and the event perspective, they now have the ability to engage with the 101,900,000 people who simply cannot be at that event. So for me, what that does is amplifies the ability. We've always had hybrid events. We just not call them hybrid events.
Yeah.
You've always had these people watching or streaming from afar, but how did you engage with them? Because there was always this digital mist. We've pierced that.
That's amazing. I can see that even being used for, like, let's just take sport. Like, who in my neighborhood also supports that team? Who in my city also supports that team? Who in my country also supports that team? Like, lots of relationships and friendships and probably even marriages and all kinds of other things are born out of things like the same interest in a sports team and stuff. So I could see that as being a brilliant way for all of these fans to engage not only with the sport and their team, but also the community around them that is also like-minded, especially if they can't go to the pub or club at the moment to sit there and watch it all together. So fantastic all that.
Can I give you one more visual just to think about? Imagine Liverpool Football Club did an open bus tour because they won the league last year, and we could capture the entire city. and all participants are and give them all a pin to imagine that scenario. Imagine marathons, the ability to capture all the runners in a particular city and the majesty of that particular city. Imagine pride events when there's 5 and 7 million people at a pride parade effectively in a city for 5 to 7 days. Just the visual spectacular of those scenarios. Yeah. And I think what we bring is the ability to space to place, and also bring the face into that too. So it's not quite space to face, but you're bringing people together and you're capturing that as well. So sorry for going off a slight tangent there, but you get the gist of the it's limitless.
There's no tangents on a podcast, mate. It's a natural conversation. It's where the mind bleeds, and I think that's what's really good about conversations like this. Is it allows us to discuss a topic a little bit more deeper and a little bit more agile than trying to put it in an article. I've got one final question for you, Chris.
Okay, sir.
What does the future of micro-influencing platforms like Spelfie look like? How do you perceive brands be using them? How do you see the audience engagement changing? I know I'm asking you a bit of a crystal ball kind of blue sky thinking here, but how does the future look from your perspective?
We spoke about technology becoming clearer and more engaging. I also, I mean, once this becomes widely used, because it will be experiential, and you can, I mean, if you go to a sporting event, you go to a music festival, you go on a cruise ship, you can imagine different things, how you could use this in different places for brand launches. I mean, movie launches. So let's imagine massive logo on an airfield and all the fans in there and be able to hold something up that has a message that says, "We love James Bond," or whatever the case may be, and obviously the Daniel Craig in the centre of that, and we can identify Daniel. I mean, you can imagine all the things you can do, yeah. So once we get by that initial creativity, I think there's an ability for augmented reality and virtual reality. You imagine a music festival, be able to put your goggles on and identify yourself in the crowd and relive that again. And imagine the ability, you can't, but imagine the ability to go back to Live Aid 30 odd years ago and have a pin above your head to say, "I was there." This is not just about today, this is about the future, and being able to share with your children, your grandchildren, that once upon a time I actually was super cool. Yeah, I was at that event, if you like, as well. So, but I think there's an element of thin air advertising as well. I mean, if you can dive in with your goggles on, and the Budweiser beer tent has a revolving scenario that you could click on and actually allow you to then relive some experience that you had there, some physical activation that you had there maybe, and also the ability to buy 6 beers and get 6 free, or whatever the case may be. So I think thin air advertising is a big element of where I think we will end up going. But I think for me, just the ability to capture experiences in a different way is probably enough for many people in the short term. And we could add in skins at some point. You can add in music at some point. There's a number of things we can do. It's almost limitless.
All right then, mate. So I'm absolutely positive that there's agencies, brands, organisers, people that organise marathons, run clubs, all these kind of things that we've just mentioned. Probably want to be interested in kind of learning a little bit more, maybe seeing some examples, testing out things, and talking about their activations. Where's the best place for people to connect up with you and check Spelfie out in more detail?
You can. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find LinkedIn. You can send me an email at chrisnewlands@spelfie.com, info@spelfie.com, contact @spelfie.com. There's a myriad of ways going forward. As I say, we're delighted to offer you some examples. There is an element of science involved. It is genuinely space. So it is really quite interesting, but it does have some limitations. Clouds is a great example of the limitations, obviously, because you can't see through clouds. But multi-day events, we send all attendees on the Monday the best shot of the weekend, so everybody's happy in that sense as well.
That's awesome, mate. I'm so thankful that you've come on today's podcast. I find this stuff fascinating, and how technology is being used to kind of change the way that we deliver events, but also provide value to organisers and sponsors and brands and that kind of stuff. I think this, I'm going to say the space that you're in is fascinating. No pun intended there, I promise you. I'd love to see maybe a Spelfie or a selfie from Mars. Maybe you can get in touch with Elon Musk and get the first Mars trip. Maybe we can do that. I know off the record you've got some amazing campaigns coming up, which you can't talk about right now.
Right.
And anybody listening or watching today's podcast, as those, I suppose, experiences come through, we'll publish about that on Event News, so people will be able to get a flavour at the level of people in an organisation that you're involved with already. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm sure we'll get you back on at some point over the future talking about how these campaigns have played out and giving him some further examples and the shifts in micro-influencing and how the events industry is working on that. Thank you very much for coming on today, and I'm sure we'll get you back on again.
Adam, thanks for having us. I do appreciate it genuinely. It's a great platform, and Event Tech Live has been great for us too. So thank you so much, sir. Appreciate that. Cheers.